All right, everybody. Welcome to the Hoops Rehab Show, the special edition. We got a special guest on tonight, NBA reporter Mark Medina. We are excited for him to join the show. How you doing, Eric?
I'm doing great, man. It's going to be awesome getting to chance to talk to Mark, pick his brain a bit. So I'm super excited.
All right. So as always, everybody, if you can follow our YouTube page, it's the Hoops Rehab Show. Please hit that subscribe button. That's where all our content is, and we'll get our videos, and we got reels, we got everything going on there. And then we'll have the pod going. So wherever you get your pod, go ahead and download the pod, subscribe to the pod. And if you can, rate and comment, that would be great. Before I bring Mark onto the show, just want to give a little bit of background. I know everybody knows him, especially if you're in Lakers land. This is Mark Medina. He's writing for Essentially Sports, Athlon. You see him on the local TV on CBS LA, Spectrum Sports, Sportsnet. And then if you're doing any of the radio shows, you're going to hear him on Fox Sports Radio. But that's not it, right? He has been a huge Lakers writer, blogger. He was Lakers blogger for the Los Angeles Times from 2010 to 2012. Lakers beat writer for the LA Daily News from 2012 to 2017. He also was writing for the Warriors as well up north, so he knows a lot about the NBA. He's worked for NBA.com, NBA reporter for USA Today, and he continues to just bring all the news that everybody wants to hear. So, without a further ado, Eric, let's welcome Mark Medina to the show. How you doing, Mark?
I'm doing fantastic after that amazing intro. Thanks for having me on and all the kind words. I'm looking forward to it.
Yeah, well, I mean, you got a lot of reputation in the game. You've been around as an NBA writer for a long time, so we can't wait to kind of pick your brain. And I'm gonna let Eric kind of start off with everything and get everything going there.
Absolutely. How's it going, Mark?
Doing fantastic. I mean, as you all know, the NBA season is just nonstop, but it's good. Just as a frame of reference point, there were 4 NBA games this week with the Lakers, Clippers at home, and I was at all of them. So it's a lot of good basketball, and you're always just wondering, do you have enough time to do it? But it's always a fun challenge to tackle.
Absolutely. In terms of, obviously we're almost at the midpoint of the season, so we are definitely kind of almost there. You kind of could see where kind of each team is at, their DNA. Obviously, we can see some deficiencies on some certain teams. I'm sure we'll get into a little bit later. But just kind of wanted to start off. Evan, went through a list of just accolades and a lot of different things that you've done in your career. And that's just so amazing for especially, people like Evan and I. Obviously, we have this platform. We're trying to build it. We figured, hey, we sit all day long and talk basketball anyways. Why not, use that, plus obviously Evan being a physical therapist, kind of using those two things together. And here we are. And so my first question is this. I'm just curious, for Evan and I, we would dream to kind of cover the NBA, as much as you did. And as you just pointed out, 4 games in a couple of nights. How did you, catch your first break, I guess you could say, covering the NBA? And I know you are out of Syracuse, which is a, huge school of journalism and all that, but, kind of talk to us about how that started.
Yeah, well, I think, Eric, there's a bunch of breaks, but I think the main one is after doing stuff for my hometown paper, the Yorkdale Record, when I was in high school, doing Friday night football games and going to Syracuse and getting involved with student media with both the newspaper and TV and doing all the internships, all the stuff you're supposed to do in college. I was able to get an internship with the LA Times shortly after graduating. And at that point, it was clearly established it's high risk, high reward. High reward, it's the LA Times. It's a major newspaper in the United States, but high risk because I didn't know how long it was going to last. But it was an easy decision to make. I drove out west. First 6 months, I was being rotated around different parts of the paper. Started in sports because of my background, but then I was being rotated into business section, into the local section, to multimedia. After that first 6 months, was transferred into sports as what they call a general assignment reporter, where I was jack of all trades, utility guy, helping out with high schools, covering the WNBA's LA Sparks. Anytime any of the major beat writers, college or pro, needed help, covering practice or an extra person to shoot video, I was there. That lasted about 9 months. And then incidentally, LA Times had a round of layoffs because that's the nature of the business. So I was a casualty, but literally 3 weeks later, I got rehired to run their Lakers blog because timing just worked out that as they were making cuts, they actually lost, two really good writers that you all may know pretty well, Andy and Brian Kameninski, going to ESPN LA. And so all of a sudden they had a vacancy. That was my foot into the NBA space. But there's been a lot of breaks of being able to get on a major beat with the Lakers, then a major beat with the Warriors. But I think the big thing, being able to be at USA Today as a national NBA reporter. And then I would say the other big break is, unfortunately, I was a layoff casualty at NBA.com 18 months after they hired me in light of just what's going on with the business. But I would say it's been a big break that I've been able to put together a lot of contract work in the writing space, maintain some of the TV and radio work I was already doing, and also adding to it. I was already doing things with Spectrum, with Fox Sports Radio, but was able to add some opportunities with working at CBS LA with the longtime esteemed sports anchor Jim Hill, as well as the rest of their team with Darren Haynes and Jamie Maggio. So yeah, I would say those are been the three main breaks. Being able to get an internship in LA with the LA Times right out of college, and then being able to get a national role at USA Today, and then still being able to make some NBA work, even though it's all on a freelance basis.
Yeah, I mean, I guess when I asked, I said break, but I mean, obviously, you were definitely went through the trenches. You've probably have seen it all. Like you said, you went to high schools and just different, forms of media, not just straight to the NBA. And so that's pretty awesome just to hear that. Hey, it's not all rainbows and sunshine. There's things unfortunately that could happen, but I know just with your expertise, you're just another job away from doing something big, with the NBA. And so that's awesome. And so appreciate that. And I know Evan's gonna take it over with a particular article that you guys worked on.
Yeah, for sure. And then I just wanted to add, were you always into the NBA? Is that what you always wanted to kind of go into, or are you thinking like any sport would suffice, I guess?
Yeah, it's a great question. I grew up on the NBA, loved it.
Yeah.
Grew up on the '90s Bulls, the Orlando Magic when Shaq was there. Then when Shaq went to the Lakers, loving that team. I was hooked on the NBA, but I did not, even as a young kid, think, okay, now I'm going to cover the NBA. I think once I was in high school and was taking this career path pretty seriously, I knew the business landscape and this idea that all of a sudden you're going to be covering marquee teams or marquee leagues, just not realistic. And so it was more about, would you still like the work if you weren't working for a major newspaper, covering a high profile team, high profile players? And the answer was still yes. And so when I was at Syracuse, the goal was about gain all this hands-on experience and seeing if I can parlay that into covering a major beat in either college or pro football or basketball. But once I got into covering the Lakers as a blogger for the LA Times, as long as I could control that, I wanted to go all in on the NBA because that is my favorite sport. There's just so many interesting things to write about with the stars, the personalities, the teams, the games. And so far, so good. I've been able to stay in that lane and kind of use each previous experience with my current experience in terms of relationship equity, as well as just, familiarity with the league landscape itself.
Yeah, that's awesome. That's great to hear. And being from, I think, Pennsylvania, right, Mark?
Yeah.
Who was your childhood team? Like, did you have an NBA team that you rooted for?
Yeah, and I'll be honest here, because where I grew up in Pennsylvania, I was kind of a front-running fan. The Washington Bullets were okay, but not great at the time. Philadelphia Sixers weren't good, so I was like one of many kids that grew up in the '90s that loved the Chicago Bulls and Michael Jordan, but I really like Shaquille O'Neal and the Orlando Magic. So when I had to make this decision, okay, who do I choose, Magic or Bulls, when they're facing up? it seemed like everyone, understandably so, liked the Bulls and Michael, that I decided, you know what, I'm going to be contrarian a little bit.
There we go.
Go for the Magic. But I loved all the teams. And, once Shaq went to the Lakers, and I learned more about just, their historic success, I started following them. But I think what clearly wound up happening here is I wasn't attached to a specific team. I just really liked the game itself, the stars, the personalities. And that's maybe made the job a little bit easier, because once you're in this field, you don't have rooting interest. You're worried about getting your story in on time, getting interviews, just being competitive out in the field, that it's not about who wins or loses. It's about just making sure you're on top of your job.
Yeah, no, that's amazing. I love that insight, especially from an NBA reporter, because it's always like when I see NBA reporters, I'm like, man, what? Like, you never know what their childhood team was, right? Because they're never going to kind of tip their hat like that. But it's cool to see that your interest in the NBA, no matter what, was the overall theme, right? You were just into these players and all these teams and legacies and stuff. So that's pretty cool.
Yeah, and the cool thing was, so I grew up in York, Pennsylvania. So I was within reasonable driving distance to go to Washington Bullets home games.
Yeah.
It's about like a 2.5 hour drive. Philadelphia, about a 2 hour drive. So we would go, my family and I would go to a lot of those games and try to see some of those marquee opponents. So it was a lot of fun.
Yeah, I think that's probably go ahead.
No, I was just saying, was this the Bullets with, Chris Webber?
It was,
Juwan Howard.
Chris Webber, Juwan Howard, Calbert Cheney, George Mirasan.
Yeah.
Who else?
Romanian.
Wallace was on that team. Yeah, it was. Yeah. I guess as I was, getting into the NBA fandom, they then became a good team. I recall they made the playoffs, I think, in the '96 season. They wound up getting dominated by the Bulls there. But when I first got introduced to the NBA, they were kind of good, but not quite great. And the Sixers, this is pre, them getting Allen Iverson. And so they were in a tough rebuilding stage.
Definitely. That's awesome, Mark. So I wanted to get into the injury article that you wrote for Essentially Sports. And you interviewed, I was lucky to be asked by you to be part of this article, which is pretty amazing. I didn't even know until the article came out that Gary Vitti was going to be in there. So that was kind of cool for me, being a Lakers fan kind of my whole life. How did you kind of come up with the concept to write an article on just like how bad the injuries have been in the first half of the season?
Yeah, well, first, Evan, thanks for being part of it. Your voice and perspective was really helpful. But how it came to be, I'll give a hat tip to some of our editors at Essentially Sports. They thought specifically because of, the influx of injuries at the beginning of the season to dive into talking to doctors for a roundtable Q&A with this. But, this isn't the first time that I've put together any, NBA pieces where it was relying on getting some insight from outside doctors. I've done a lot of these, not just with Essentially Sports, but with Sportskeeda. A lot of times when I was on the Lakers beat, Warriors beat, and there was a major injury, one of many features ideas I would do would be to talk to doctors to get their perspective. And part of it is twofold. One, NBA teams and players have become increasingly guarded and not really open with the information, with timeline play-by-play of the recovery and severity of injuries. And so I think it's very helpful to talk to doctors, even with the caveat that they're not working with the team, they don't have familiarity with the medical tests, et cetera, et cetera. They can at least provide informed perspective on this subject matter because they're educated in it. That's their field. So that approach has been really helpful when you look at my career path, because there was a lot of notable injuries. I think the best example, obviously, is Kobe Bryant when he tore his Achilles in the 2012-13 season, and he had different season-ending injuries the next 2 years, with his knee, with his shoulder. It extends toward the Warriors when Kevin Durant tore his Achilles in the 2019 NBA Finals. And, even in national roles, now it's not just one team, it's the whole league. So when there have been star players having significant injuries, whether it's Klay Thompson with Achilles or anything else, it's been really helpful, I think, for myself and as well as the reader to talk to you all, because you all, have a really great perspective about all this.
Yeah, I mean, that's some great insight right there, because a lot of times for my example, obviously I'm not seen any of these players. I haven't seen any of the imaging, but it does seem like a lot of teams don't want to give that much info, right? And that's normal. It's probably they don't want to give the other teams advantage as well, right? Too. So I could see that both ways. After you wrote this article, did you gather anything from all the doctors that you have talked to and just get a sense of why you think from a reporter side that there might be more injuries this year, or at least over the last couple of years, more of these soft tissue injuries and some of the drastic Achilles and ACL injuries? There's more now than there was in the 80s and 90s. Did you get a sense of why that might be?
Yeah, really good question. Now, the caveat here is the NBA will tell you that while there are a lot of notable injuries, especially some of the high-profile players, the volume of injuries aren't necessarily different than it has been in most seasons. But I think anecdotally, our antenna has gone up a lot because of, I think that the most notable examples that you may recall we discussed were some of these calf injuries that then led to Achilles injuries during the NBA Finals with Tyrese Halliburton, most notably. And we know the same thing happened with Jason Tatum and Damian Lillard. I think what was fascinating after talking with you, talking with Gary Vitti and some of the other outside doctors, is that you all made great salient points, but it also added, I think it really revealed why this is such a complex issue, because there's not one single reason for that from a medical lens. And when you're looking at that and also balancing the obvious business interests that the NBA and the players have, it makes it a really complicated puzzle to try to solve here. But I think the common denominator that I found through all this is that clearly pace of play is a factor. The fact that there's more possessions per game, the fact that it's faster, the fact that players are being asked to stretch the floor and also accelerate really fast and all of a sudden stop, have to twist, that affects the body a lot. And, I know that there's a lot of, players from previous generations that roll their eyes on this and say, hey, the players are soft. Back in my day, we flew commercial flights and the game was more physical. And all those things are true, but the pace of play does not compare beyond the Showtime Lakers. But normally the pace of play was a lot more methodical, a lot more plotting. And even if it was a more physical game, you weren't being asked to do all these other things with stretching the floor, having to make all these sudden twisting movements and stop and go movements. I think the other thing that I gathered is that it seems like you all thought that specialization, especially at a young age, contributed to it, where there's more and more players that are deciding earlier, well before they're in high school, I'm going to specialize in basketball. And what that's done is, one, they're playing a lot more games. Two, they're not in total supervision, at least right away, on how to train properly, how to take care of their body. And three, there's just no avenue for rest recovery. I think the other part I picked up since the injury, since this article came out, is that even though players take their craft seriously, they have great medical staffs, they work with trainers. Anecdotally, it seems like players are spending their offseason training individually on skill work, which is good, but sometimes it's at the cost of actually playing up and down scrimmaging. And when you're not used to that kind of workload, and then all of a sudden you're going into training camp, practicing, you're going into games, playing at full speed, your body's not used to it. So those were the clear common denominators, but the things that I gathered there wasn't a consensus on is to what degree does an 82 game schedule contribute to it, and should it be reduced for reasons beyond, or should the NBA have any pushback beyond just the obvious business interest? That I sense there isn't a consensus on. Some think, there's too many games, you got to shorten the schedule. There's others that think, that's not much of a difference because the other factors that I outlined seem more significant.
Yeah, I just think it's going to be like, in terms of like shortening the season, I think it's going to be probably tough for the owners to kind of get on top of that, because they obviously get 41 home games. And so I think that's a big part of it. Like for me, it just, I don't know, I feel maybe you kind of stretch out the season a bit and you get rid of back-to-backs. Maybe something like that will help. But also, it's just so interesting because I know the NBA has said so many times, like, it's been pretty consistent in terms of the amount of injuries year in and year out. But it feels weird. But is it just me that I remember Dominique Wilkins tearing his Achilles in the 90s, and then the next one I could remember is Kobe in 2013, right? And so since then, there's been so many. I know there's been others in between there, but it's just interesting that I feel like that big gap. I wonder what happened there. And so obviously there's other sports where it happens. I remember Vinny Testaverde, I think, tearing his Achilles in 98 or 99 or something like that. And Dan Marino in the mid 90s. But yeah, it's just, I sometimes think like what can be done, but I mean, they play positionless basketball now. Right. And so to your point, Mark, I mean, you switch everything. You're kind of just taught to just guard. Look at OKC. They guard you just nonstop. Right when you get the ball, right when you take the ball out of the basket, they're in your grill, right? And so, sorry, kind of just wanted to add that there's probably just so much to it. We'll see if it changes. But I know the doc has always said, if you don't practice all year, right, you barely have any practices, and all of a sudden you go play a back-to-back, I think that's asking for injury.
Yeah, without a doubt. I think the challenging part that, training staffs and coaches go through, that once you start the NBA season, a lot of it is just trying to get to the next game, get to the next city.
Yep.
And, they do take seriously the need for players to recover. But sometimes it's to the extreme that if you're constantly just in recovery mode, it's the analogy of you're driving the classic car, and it has a lot of miles on it, and you want to take good care of it. But if you're just storing in a garage for 10 months and then all of a sudden driving it, like, it'll probably break down, right? So there has to be some sort of in between. I think the Clippers are a great example of this because of Kawhi Leonard being the face of load management, and obviously the organization as well at this current point in time, that I think in recent years, they have been trying to be more proactive with having practices in training camp. So it's not all of a sudden rest, recovery off season, and then jumping right in. There is kind of a gradual process. But the problem here is that once the season starts, some of those ideals you have about practice, it goes out the window because of the travel itinerary, the compressed nature of the schedule. And here is where, obviously all parties want to have its cake and eat it too, that it's a non-starter for any proposal about shortening the 82-game season. You mentioned, it's because owners aren't going to be behind it, but there's so many other people that have business interests that aren't going to be behind it. You have the owners, you have the coaches, you have the players. To a lesser degree, you have the broadcast partners. You also have the concession workers. You have so many different constituents that are going to be financially impacted because of that. And I think if you connect the dots, it seems obvious that's never going to change. So how do they change everything else? Especially when you can make the argument that, hey, the NBA has had an 82-game schedule in previous generations, and it wasn't as bad. And I think the other wrinkle to add to this is, even though we've seen more, anecdotally, more injuries, et cetera, we've also seen examples of players prolonging their career. LeBron James is literally the only player right now to be playing 23 seasons. You look at Kevin Durant, Steph Curry. Like, it's very uncommon when you look at the history of the NBA in previous eras for anyone to be playing past 35, 36.
Yeah. And
there's a lot of players right now that are, LeBron's obviously 41, but Steph, Durant, they're getting up there as well past their, mid 30s, and they could possibly playing in their early 40s as well. And, the NBA teams will tell you, like, part of the proactive part of load management and being more sophisticated about how they measure their workload, et cetera, that's one of the byproducts. The players are extending their career. So it's I think the challenging part of this is that these things feel contradictory, but they're not. All these things are all true. But how do you put all this into the appropriate puzzle piece to make the best product moving forward?
Yeah, definitely. And not only are they playing longer, they're playing the same longer, right? Their skills aren't diminishing. Like I don't know, when growing up in the 90s, you saw these players when they get to the 12th, 13th, 14th season, like you saw a total different player. And like you look at KD, Steph, and LeBron, there's slight differences that you see, but they're so small that they still are like all pro players, right? So I think that's amazing, and that's a part of the how they've trained and things like that too. I wanted to get to your point just a little bit because I think that's a huge point that you made. So in the off season, they're doing more skill training and not so much of these open gym runs. And I remember just being in LA, there's those UCLA runs that everybody would be at. Kobe would be there, LeBron would be there. I mean, all these players would be there, right? And you just don't really see that as much anymore, right? You don't see as much of the scrimmaging, right? I feel like I haven't seen anything since Devin Booker got double teamed in a scrimmage in the summer, and next thing you know, there's no more scrimmaging because they don't want to get double teamed, right? So I think that's an excellent point. Have you talked to any players about that, or just in general about the injuries and the practice schedule and things like that? Have you got those ideas from them as well?
Yeah, I think for the most part, players it'll be clear and saying, hey, we're not the ones that are saying we want to sit out. This is, what front offices are telling us. This is what the medical staff is telling us. And so, I think the previous generation will make the argument, well, you should be using your capital as a star player to be banging down the door and saying, you know what, I don't care. I mean, there's a lot of infamous episodes that we knew about, but it was retold during the Last Dance documentary with Michael Jordan when, they were telling him, you have to sit out. And I think 85, 86, because he was dealing with all these foot injuries and he just wasn't having it. But I think the players, they might, they might give their captain's try appeal, but I think in fairness to them, they have validated, you know what, the feedback from the medical staff, they're experts in this. So I'll listen to it. But they've made it clear we're not the ones saying, oh, we got to sit out. Like, we want to play. It's just them saying no because they want to protect us from ourselves. I think it was notable, with the Clippers, because again, Kawhi's gotten a lot of criticism over the years because of the nature of his injuries and just how much he was sitting out. I remember before Paul George left for the Sixers, he made it clear that he wished that the team would scrimmage more. And I do want to clarify a little bit because it's not like players aren't scrimmaging in the offseason. There's still those UCLA runs, but it just seems like anecdotally there is a lot more emphasis because players are working with personal trainers to do skill work. And none of those things are bad. It's just how do you find the perfect sweet spot and blending these things together? Here's an example. Klay Thompson, he has his ACL injury in the 2019 NBA Finals. The Warriors knew that he was going to be out for basically the entire year, the following year. And so leading into the 2020-21 season, which took place like shortly after the bubble season, the day of the NBA draft, when the Warriors have the number 2 pick, they used on James Wiseman. That didn't work out. But anyway, that day he was scrimmaging. He was, doing some things in LA, and he injures his Achilles. Yeah. And I know, they didn't concede this right away, but I learned, as well as other reporters, that they weren't really too thrilled with the fact that Klay was scrimmaging because there weren't medical people with the Warriors there to make sure that he's doing it correctly. He's rehabbing and, he wanted to make the next steps, but from the Warriors perspective, that was something that he was not supposed to do. And so with all these things, it's all about like, how do you find the happy medium? How do you find the sweet spot so that you can get the best of both worlds and kind of having the appropriate guardrails to, protect yourselves from some of the negative parts of either approach.
Yeah, it's such a double-edged sword. You want your guys out there scrimmaging and kind of gearing up for the offseason, but I mean, these are assets. They're high-paid players that just mean so much to the team. And so I can see where you keep mentioning sweet spot, and it's so true. And so I don't think there's an exact, science to it, but you're right, Evan. I remember always hearing about like, oh, these guys used to play at UCLA, and so obviously Mark's point, it looks like they're still doing it, just maybe not as much. But that's what I always think too. It's kind of damned if you do, damned if you don't. Unfortunately.
Yeah, and I think the older generation will talk about cross training, right? They would go play other sports in the off season. They grew up playing multiple sports. There's the whole AAU system, which is a hot mess right now, I think, because the kids are just playing year round and just playing nothing but basketball, right? When you had a generation that grew up playing multiple sports, especially when you got to high school and things like that. So I think there's so many factors to it. Whereas the style of play, pace of play, too much playing as in the youth, or not enough scrimmaging, practicing during the season. I think that it's going to have to continue to get looked at. And then sometimes I feel that there's been, which is good, there's been a lot of advancement in medicine, and there's been a lot of advancement with getting the right people, right staff in guises. But I think sometimes they try to do too much metric work or analytic work where they're basing things on what they've seen in the past, but not necessarily what they're hearing from the player. And so that means, hey, this player can't play today, or this player needs a rest. And the player's saying, I'm good, or I can go, right? So it's such a hard balance to kind of to minimize the risk, right? There's no matter what, there's always going to be a risk of injury because you're playing a sport. That's why I tell my patients, is what I tell my clients. They're like, how do I reduce my risk? Or how do I prevent completely from injuring? And I'm like, well, don't play anything, right? Like literally, like if you go out on a field, there is a risk of an injury. Like that's just the simple fact of it, right? So it's hard to really put it all into one picture. But I think we're doing a better job at looking at the whole spectrum of things. And eventually one day, I think it will go down a little bit as advancements in medicine kind of get better. So.
Yeah, it's a lot of good points. And I think, the other thing that's complicated here, you brought up AAU. I think, one of the necessities on why players have tapped into it, it's an exposure vehicle for recruiting and just, being able to sync with the right coaches when it comes to college. And that leads to another, obviously they want to play against their peers, but the downside of it is because there's so many games, there is a tendency for burnout where some players all of a sudden fall out of love with the sport and just want to disavow it completely. Ones that still like the sports, there's a concern that they don't feel the same frustration and pain and agony of losing as previous generations did when they're playing the playground. The rules were, hey, winners stay on the court, and if you want to play again, you got to wait. And that could be a long time because there's other teams ready to take the court. Where in AAU, you lose, you got another game, either shortly later that afternoon or the next day, and it's like whatever. I think the other thing that's really tough here is that, the pros, yes, it extends the career, but the cons is players aren't as consistently available as they were in previous season, previous generations. Yeah. And the whole goal of it for the NBA, obviously they want to make money, but you want to have just a great, compelling product on the floor that gives fans a want to go to the arena. And again, like you can't guarantee anything in life. So this idea that if you buy a ticket, that automatically means that every player is going to be available. No, but by and large, there should be this expectation that, these games matter. And even though you want to take the big picture, the long game, it can't dilute it so much that teams are treating regular season games as if they're preseason games.
Yeah, I think that it's a little bit of like ring culture, right? And so a lot of teams and players, they're judged by how they do in the postseason. And to me, the bread and butter of the NBA now is the postseason. It's 2 months long. And so I think that just adds to it. It's like, let's rest our guys. And Evan and I talk about it all the time with LeBron. Like we want to make sure LeBron is in like the best shape possible. Cause is he going to really be able to go through a, month and a half, 2 months, playoff run if Lakers are lucky to get there. And so I think that's something that just is a wrinkle that's just part of it as well. Elephant in the room, if you will, you know?
Yeah, without a doubt. And how about this for another wrinkle? I mean, front offices, the way they operate in organizations, it's the old adage that people in the league say that a team is either selling winning or they're selling hope. And so if they
Yeah.
don't have if they don't have if you have the lane of you're selling winning, you're making all these moves about how to manage players so that they can win a championship in June. Now, if you're selling hope, it can be for different reasons. Hey, you want to protect your NBA lottery odds to get a high draft pick, or just protect, hey, you know what? We didn't have a great season because there are injuries, but now for next season, they're going to be loaded to make a run. So it's all these dueling interests. You know, some of it obviously financial, but some of it's also competitive. So I know the NBA's, try to put in new mechanisms like the play-in tournament so that there's not this extreme tank in the end of the season. There's teams that are in that playoff bubble that are still, trying to compete and play meaningful basketball. But, one of the downsides is for the teams that are really, really out of that picture, they've gone to extreme measures to make sure they're trying to lose a lot of games so that, they still have the best odds to, have a high draft pick.
100%. And speaking of teams that are trying to make a run, I know we wanted to get into those Lakers, Eric. So I'm gonna let Eric ask some questions here because he's having a little difficult time with these Lakers as of late.
Well, you've been watching the games lately.
Yeah.
Exactly.
I mean, look, we talked about earlier. So we're trying to be a show of, covering the NBA and injuries. And so, but we're not going to hide the fact that there's a Lakers logo to the right of Evan there. And there's, I don't know if you could see it, there's a picture of the floor there. And so we definitely bleed purple and gold. And so, I think if you asked us, or if you told us, hey, the Lakers are going to be 24-15 at one point, they're going to be the 5th seed, they're going to be about 2 games in the loss column from the 2nd seed, we would probably take it. But just the way it's kind of turned out this year. So there was a stretch, I believe Lakers had won 12 of 15. They've lost 4 of 5. I mean, what do you think? Do you think it's just as simple as Austin Reeves is out, and so that's a big piece? Do you think, or do you think there's more to it?
Oh, there's definitely more to it. I mean, Austin Reeves has shown that if he hadn't gotten injured, he would be in strong consideration to make the All-Star team. And I think because of how well he played before his injury, it validated why the Lakers are thinking, you know what, let's sign him to a really good deal this summer. He's that special of a player. But I think the main thing is that the Lakers are very flawed defensively. And even some of the patchwork measures they did in the offseason with getting some respectable defensive players like Marcus Smart on the perimeter, Gabe Vincent's back, it really isn't enough because DeAndre Ayton, he's a little bit of a rim protector, but not much. His effort wanes. And Jackson Hayes, great lob threat, he can be a good rim protector too, but there's just not enough defensive reinforcement. I think the other thing is this isn't a criticism of LeBron James, just the reality. I think that when on the floor, he's playing at a very respectable level, but he's not the same defender as he once was. But I think also, in fairness, he was a great defender, but because of the amount of money he's making, which he deserves every penny of, they don't have currently the resources to have a lot of great defensive depth, let alone depth itself. They put together some respectable depth offensively around LeBron, Luka Doncic, and Austin Reeves. But, I think the most recent loss to the Hornets illustrates that Gabe Vincent couldn't hit a shot. Marcus Smart was struggling as well. Rui Hachimura, who is usually a pretty dependable scorer, has struggled to have his rhythm after missing some time with his injury here. So, yes, it goes beyond Austin Reeves. It's mostly defensively. I know talking to Marcus Smart a few weeks ago, he said these things are correctable. They just have to communicate more. But as an objective observer, even if their efforts more disciplined, even if they're communicating better, I think that just makes for them to be an average team that can make the playoffs as maybe a 4th seed, as low as 6, and then they either, barely win the first round and get blown out in the second, or they even lose in the first round completely. There is a clear difference between the Lakers and the top teams in the West with the Thunder and the Spurs and the Nuggets.
Yeah, I mean, when I think about their starting lineup as a whole when healthy, you look at, go down the line, you go to Luka, Austin, LeBron, Rui, and Aiden, and you really don't have quality defenders in this type of league that catch up and hold up the young teams in this league, like OKC, Minnesota, even like Atlanta, like some of these teams that just run and gun, even Charlotte last night, right? They have a lot of offensive talent. So is there something that can be done with a trade that the Lakers could realistically get it done? Or is that something that we're going to have to wait until the summer of 26?
Yeah, well, I should add here, Jared Vanderbilt's now getting rotation minutes. He's a respectable player.
Yeah,
and,
that's right.
I think there was fair criticism on, okay, why wasn't he getting run at the beginning of the season? JJ Redick really leaning into having offensive-oriented starting lineups because I think he concluded, this is our calling card. Our defensive weaknesses outside of Vanderbilt are so pronounced. We got to lean on the fact that they have Luka Doncic who can score a lot of points. Same thing with Austin Reeves and LeBron once he's back. But that helped a little bit, but eventually their defensive flaws got exposed. So what does that mean moving forward for the trade deadline? Knowing how Rob Pelinka is, he's going to be opportunistic. He'll make phone calls, but I'm just looking at this objectively. I don't see what assets outside of the untradables with Luka and Austin Reeves that would warrant much interest in the open market. I mean, you package Gabe Vincent and Rui Hachimura and any other player. Like, I don't think that's really going to get a lot that puts them over the top this season. So you might make the argument, well, why not make LeBron available in a trade? Well, one, LeBron's got to waive his new trade clause. And two,
Right.
even with how great of a generational talent LeBron James is, that would require a team to gut their roster because of his salary number. So I don't think he's tradable either, even if the Lakers want to do that. And even if LeBron said, you know what, I'm upset with this, I'm going to waive it. So I think they're making the pragmatic decision. You know what? Given all the circumstances of him being 41 years old, 23rd season, he's still a net positive offensively, how he is as a leader, how well he takes care of his body. And it's the Lakers. They have business interests. It's good to take care of your stars. And if there is a farewell tour, the Lakers can enjoy that this season. Austin Reeves, people might say, oh, trade Austin Reeves. I don't see it. Even though he's not, the greatest defender, I think that he has shown that he coexists really well with Luka Doncic, where they're both comfortable ball handling guards. Austin attacks the basket really well. Luka's got his step back. It's now this summer about building a good supporting cast around those two players. So that's my guess. It's not to say that Rob Pelinka and the front office should just twiddle their thumbs and not do anything before the trade deadline next month. But realistically, I just don't see it. But again, I'm not in the front office, and there's a reason why, all these front office folks on all 30 teams have jobs, because they're very savvy with how they manage the cap and are creative with finding ways to address their positional needs.
So what you're saying is you don't expect a repeat of February 1st of last year when Luka Doncic got traded on, I think it was a Saturday night. And
yes. In other words, I don't think Giannis Antetokounmpo is going to fall in their lap. I don't think that the Bucks or Giannis are in the mind of actually parting ways, at least at this trade deadline. I know Giannis talked with the Athletic's Sam Amick not too long ago, where he was making it clear he wouldn't request a trade when the Bucks were in town last week in LA. The vibe I got from people around the organization is that, he is still invested, not only just playing with at a high level, but just has great chemistry with his teammates, really respects Doc Rivers. But I think as it pertains to the Lakers, they don't have the assets to be able to get Giannis. And even something like someone like Daniel Gafford from the Dallas Mavericks, I don't think it's realistic because of the history that happened last year with Dallas. So they gifted Luka in a nice bow.
Yeah, I think any deals with Dallas, in the short term, is going to be pretty tough after kind of what happened. And so, Lakers were beaten up on some under 500 teams, and that kind of inflated the record. They've lost, I believe, to the last few with Milwaukee and Sacramento, and then obviously Charlotte last night. And so I just knew it. Once they start losing some of those games against under 500 teams, it's gonna come to a head. And so we'll have to see, kind of what happens. But you kind of talked a little bit about, our next topic, a farewell tour, perhaps. And so with LeBron, like the patch, heard around the world in Sacramento. And so, I just kind of want to ask, like, what's your gut feeling? I mean, I got to say, I know they're playing in Cleveland, I believe January 28th. Wouldn't that be a nice place to kind of announce that, this is it? And so I don't know if it's what's going to happen, but it is something that's crossed my mind. What's your gut feeling with LeBron, going forward this season?
Yeah, this is only my gut feeling. This isn't anything from him or the team. I think that this is his last year, but
Yeah.
I'm only LeBron truly knows, but I wouldn't be surprised if he actually doesn't know the answer to this question, because there's just so many things that are complicated here that you want to leave yourself flexible in the off chance the Lakers do make a pretty big move that all of a sudden bolsters the championship window, seeing if he can still sustain this relatively strong level of play that the Lakers would have interest in keeping him, at a much different, salary number, or at least other teams that would give him a shot to still win a championship. And so I think that it's easy to connect the dots when you're looking at the fact that, oh yeah, he has really made it clear that he's loves golf and he's been watching a lot of that stuff on his free time. But I think the challenging part is he's in unprecedented territory, that he is still playing at an all-star caliber level. And that has made it very difficult to now say, okay, when do you hang it up? Because you look at Kobe Bryant, for example. I wrote a column about this on Athlon Sports. The dynamics of how he handled his final years couldn't be any more different. I think partly because the writing was on the wall. When Kobe was having all those season-ending injuries, Kobe told me and others that really crystallized for him what he wants to do post-basketball, with getting involved with these storytelling companies, and also knowing like the end is near. And also the fact that the Lakers weren't good. Like they were going through a lot of, mishaps with just different coaching changes, front office instability. They had young players, but they weren't fully tested there. And I know very early on in what ultimately became Kobe's final year, there was this thought that, hey, because of this young core, if they make a run, would Kobe want to extend his career? But by the time November hit, it was clear that Kobe's body was worn down. He's having one of the worst years of his career, shooting a career low from the field. And the young guys, D'Angelo Russell, Julius Randle, Jordan Clarkson, they're good young players, but they're not ready to carry a team right. So the writing was clearly on the wall by mid-November for Kobe to say, you know what, I'm going to announce through this poem, Dear Basketball, that's my final year. With LeBron, dynamics are completely different. The Lakers already have their next generational star set up for them for whenever LeBron retires, and Luka Doncic. They're not a championship contender favorite right now, but they're still a viable playoff team. And LeBron, again, is still playing at a reasonably high level that I think because of that, I don't know what's going to happen, but my guess is we're going to have enough clear data from these next few months that LeBron's still playing well, but not the same as he once was. The Lakers are good, but not a great team. And it would just be easier to call it a career as opposed to going through any potential awkwardness of trying to find the right team, the right fit, without taking such a significant discount that all of a sudden LeBron's supplementing who he is, not just with his earnings, but his role, considering his resume as one of the greatest players of all time.
Yeah, I mean, to me, that makes a lot of sense. I mean, the fact that he's still playing at basically all NBA status right now makes it like, man, he could continue to play if he really wanted to. So I think the difference between him and Kobe, right? You kind of knew Kobe was, body wasn't really holding up. To me, going into this season, my thought on the LeBron situation was that he was just going to see how his body feels And then that would be the ultimate decision, right? Like I could probably still have the skill to play, but my body is just not allowing me to do that. And so when he went into the season with sciatica, which is something he's, never really been out for a long period of time for, that concerned me, like number one, because I was like, that's something that's different, right? That's something that, we haven't seen LeBron start his, he's never missed a season opener, right? And so that was my thought. I thought it wouldn't be until the beginning of 26 where if he does make a decision, you'll hear it at some point before the All-Star break. And then when I heard the patch and he's going to wear it the rest of the season and on every game, that kind of gave me a little bit more leaning towards the fact that this could be it. Now, I feel like because he's LeBron, like he has to have some announcement. But do you think he could actually literally retire in the offseason versus coming back?
Yeah, I could see him retire in the offseason, but to your point, and I share this view that a lot of people around the NBA and around the Lakers think, because of how LeBron is and how outspoken he is, and how, some will say to his detriment that he likes the limelight. There's so many people that think, yes, LeBron wants the farewell tour. So this idea that, yeah, he'll just play the season, and if he decides this is it, he's going to hang it up. No one thinks that's going to happen. They think that there's going to be some sort of announcement so that he gets that treatment, as well as, just the ability to reflect a little bit about his career. And I think, the fascinating thing about Kobe is before he did not want to do this whole farewell tour because he was in the mind of wants to win championships, et cetera, et cetera. But once it was clear he's not winning another championship and he's not the same player as he once was, he eventually embraced it because I think that he viewed it as, kind of a small little victory in an otherwise frustrating season where he could, kind of enjoy the adulation, express his gratitude to opponents, as well as, reflect on his career and, maybe give some version of his own perspective on different parts of his career that could, tie up his legacy a little bit. And so I think that's what LeBron will want to do. But I think, again, the challenging thing is I'm with you. I see that jersey patch and I think, okay, this is a sign that he is going to call it this season. But I truly don't know. I am predicting this is his final season, but I just don't know if he has actually decided that definitively yet. And I also don't know the timeline of when he would make that announcement so that he has that farewell tour treatment.
Yeah, I know there's definitely was a big difference, I think, between the Kobe's, as you guys both illustrated, and LeBron. And so, I mean, you never know, right? I mean, you look at Indiana last year; they made the finals. They were one game away, maybe one torn Achilles away from winning it. And so, when you have when you have a chance, when you are potentially maybe Lakers get a 2 or 3 seed and they get a couple home playoff series. And so I don't think it's kind of going to end with a championship, but that has to be kind of in mind. Like, this is not a bad team like Kobe's led Lakers were. And so I don't know, man, it'll be interesting. I know a lot of Laker fans, like LeBron is so polarizing in LA since he's been here. I mean, I know people that can't, stand him. And I'm at where, hey, this guy kind of saved us. I mean, he's averaging 23, 6, and 7 right now. If you take away his name and I gave you that stat, I think you'd take that any day. And so we'll have to see what happens. I know he still has to play at Cleveland and at Miami this year. So those are kind of like spots where, as I mentioned earlier, we'll kind of see what happens. But we'll have to see, guys.
Yeah. And for me, speaking of contenders, I kind of wanted to get to this last subject here if we can. I wanted to get your take on the true contenders in the NBA right now. So if you had to put 5 contenders, obviously we have the OKC, but if you had 5 true contenders right now, who would they be?
Yeah, it'd be OKC, it'd be San Antonio, it'd be Denver, it would be New York, and it would be Detroit. I hate to be boring here and go chalk and just, hey, look at the standings, anyone can do it. But
Yep.
I think that the Thunder have shown that last season's championship wasn't a fluke. They got continuity. They're mostly in their prime. But, the other contender, the Spurs, they're vulnerable. They've beaten them more than a few times this season. They have a little bit of a rivalry going. And the Spurs have shown, this isn't just Victor Wembanyama or this fun, young, upcoming team. They're here. They have obviously the Spurs culture, all that institutional knowledge, but Stefan Castle and De'Aaron Fox and Dylan Harper, that's a hell of a backcourt. And they coexist really well together. Dylan embraces that bench role. Stefan Castle and De'Aaron Fox know how to play on, off ball. And obviously Wemby is just this generational beast. The Denver Nuggets, I think, obviously there's going to be concerns, how Nikola Jokic is when he's back. And, they've had other injuries with Aaron Gordon. But, assuming no major injuries, we've seen that as long as you have Nikola on your team, you're always in the mix. And, unlike last season, they got a healthier and more consistent Jamal Murray, and they got a better supporting cast. So that's that in the West. The East, Cade Cunningham is an MVP candidate, aggressive scorer, great teammate, great playmaker. They have a great defender in Ausar Thompson. They're a good young team. They're very scrappy. They have that kind of Detroit identity. They're not Bad Boys Pistons, but they're a very resilient, competitive young team. And then the Knicks, they're basically just ran it back, but with Mike Brown as a head coach who, Tom Thibodeau is a great coach, but I think what Mike Brown's done is he has the great qualities that Tom has of preparation, head coaching experience, great defensive schemes. But Mike Brown's offense, better pace, better use of personnel. So that's that. The Celtics, I've been pleasantly surprised with. Yeah. But even though they've been really, really good, Jaylen Brown's playing at MVP level. Their supporting cast is great. As much as I shouldn't be discounting them, I just can't see how, in the grand scheme of things, that's enough against New York and Detroit.
Yeah, I would say, if Boston is somehow still, number 2 seed, number 3 seed, and you get to March, April, and you hear that Tatum is going to be coming back, right? You have a positive, I wouldn't say if you get to April, I just don't think that's realistically for him to come back in April. Would be smart for him, and then for just to kind of reorient yourself in the team with 2 weeks to go, it doesn't really make sense. But if you hear that he's coming back early March, I would be super scared of Boston going into the playoffs, because I just feel like Jaylen Brown's playing by himself for the first time, has figured out obviously he can be the man, he can be an MVP candidate, and now you have another MVP candidate coming in your wing and coming right behind you. I think that could be a scary thing for the East, especially with the East pretty much up for the taking.
Yeah, it's a really good point. And I think that the fact that Boston is still in this mix, there could be a better incentive, not only for Jason Tatum to come back, he wants to come back, but for the Celtics to green light it. I'm just, Evan, you obviously know the nature of Achilles injuries. I have just a lot of concern when it comes to a player coming back the following season, just the integration and the rust. And it would have to be accepted, even though Jason Tatum and Jaylen Brown have shown they can coexist. This idea that they can't coexist, that's an old narrative that they've been able to overcome. But integrating him and trying to get him up to speed without disrupting what they already have, it's a very delicate thing, even if all parties have good intentions. But you know what? They've already exceeded expectations. So if they have that, I guess they'll be proving myself and other people wrong once again.
Yeah. Yeah. Coming from a physical therapy standpoint, I would hope he would be out for the season and just kind of come back next season, right? So he can just have himself prepared to play at this level, right? Because it's a different competition, especially when you get into that March, April time in the NBA. You've gotten past football's over, right? And you've gotten past all of that. And so it would be a cool storyline to see, but at the same time, probably the smartest thing is to sit out the rest of the year.
Yeah. And you know what? They might not tell you this now because they're competitive, but think at the beginning of the season when they traded Kristaps Porzingis and Drew Holiday because of second apron concerns, it was viewed as, you know what, this year is a gap year. They're not going to tank, but it's about, reloading for the following season. So, you know what? The Celtics being a really dangerous team in the East next season with what they've built while Jason Tatum is out, then Tatum coming back, that's a real game changer.
Yeah, definitely. All right, Mark. Well, we appreciate you coming on. I know we probably extended our welcome with you on this show.
Great combo, though. It was fun.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Yeah. It was great to talk about, we got into the injuries, got into the NBA and got into all that stuff. So we appreciate you coming on. But before you leave, because I know you talk about the NFL sometimes, who you got this weekend and who do you think is actually going to win the Super Bowl?
Oh, man. To your point, yes, I did talk about the Rams and the Chargers on CBS. This is a tough one. If I had to pick Super Bowl champion, I'll go with the Rams against, let's see, who in the AFC?
Buffalo.
You know what? I will go with Buffalo. They got a great running game. It's going to be the Rams and the Bills. Who do I pick?
That was my prediction.
You know what? They haven't been always consistent. They have struggled playing on the road. Special teams isn't the greatest, but I'll go with the Rams because Matthew Stafford has still been playing at a great level. And they have a top 10 defense offense. So, yeah, they'll play the Bills and beat them in the Super Bowl like it's the 90s.
There we go.
That was Eric's prediction when we started the season. Right, Eric?
Oh, wow.
Yep. I mean, I don't think it was going like too, it was obviously two kind of highly favored teams, but as the season has unfolded, and so they both would have to go on the road and win 3 games most likely, unless San Fran wins, and Rams host them. But yeah, we'll have to see. To me, honestly, the division round is like my favorite weekend. It's just 4 games, 2 on Saturday, 2 on Sunday. I mean, I'm ready for it, but I really appreciate it, Mark. It was such a pleasure to meet you, and you provided such great insight, and it was awesome to have you on.
Likewise, Evan, Eric, great to talk with you and really enjoyed it.
Awesome. All right, so we're going to let you go, but we appreciate you on, and hopefully we'll have you back at some point.
Sounds good. Looking forward to it.
Thank you.
All right. All right, everybody. So this was our first guest on here. Mark Medina covers everything in the NBA. That was a lot of fun. We talked about injuries. We talked about the NBA. Talked about them Lakers, obviously, and seeing if anything's going to go down. But Eric, you got anything else to say before we get out of here?
No, I mean, other than obviously I already thanked Mark. It was just an amazing show. I was so so happy and so amazed to be able to do this. We went through a lot of just insider information, and hopefully everybody will enjoy once you watch this. And other than that, let's enjoy the games this weekend and have a good one.
All right. So as always, everybody, we are out. The Hoops Rehab team is out tonight. Peace out, guys.